As usual, I haven't been given a topic. So I was wondering what to talk about. Everyone here. So we are driving in from the airport. He said, just talk about yourself, what you've done, and that would be probably interesting to everyone. So I'm going to talk about my story, and I'd be happy to answer questions at the end if you like. Bottom line, I'm like most of you, I guess. Middle class background. My dad was in the army. My mother was a doctor, but a teaching medical doctor. Went all over the country. So I had probably lived in a lot of places. Fortunately, I think it was in 1961, my dad got called up for the Chinese War. So he went off to the Northeast. And my mother got a postdoctoral Ford Foundation fellowship to go to the Harvard School of Public Health. So both the kids, my younger sister and I, went off to a boarding school. My mother came back a year later, and obviously they couldn't afford 2 kids in boarding. So my sister, because she was 3 years younger, got pulled into a day school. She's never forgiven me for that. I was too close to my senior candidate, so they left me at the boarding school I was in. And so I graduated from the good school in Delhi. And then went off to IIT Patna, did my electronics. And like everyone in IIT in those days, I had decided to go abroad. Because that was the standard thing. And I, quite unlike a lot of people in my class, I was clear on what I wanted to do. My grandfather was a scientist, my mother taught. So I thought I would become a professor or get into research. So I was going to go to Stanford or Berkeley, and I got admission to both. Go do my master's and PhD, and then work for NASA. And the reason for NASA was, when I did my electronics, computers was an option, which I didn't take. I took control systems. So the idea was to try and work with NASA to do satellite control, sitting on the Earth, trying to manage satellite communications and stuff like that. Life is never what you expect it to be. So I didn't even apply for it. I was that clear on what I wanted to do. It's just that I still remember my mother sent me a cutting for a job. It was a DCA management training job. It's called senior management training in those days. And as I always claim, I'm a sucker for logic. So she had one line in it that I still remember. She said, interviews are like exams. The more you do, the better you are. And I thought that was a really smart line. So to acknowledge that line, I filled up the application and sent it. And then I forgot about it. So I come to Delhi, I'm doing my TOEFL, and I'm getting my visa to go abroad. And I have a classmate of mine. I guess you have them here also. All these guys who go batchmate basically. Go to IIT are really smart guys, but some of them are very nervous. So when you're walking to the exam, the guy suddenly asks you, do you remember this equation? And so you're trying to say at that time I want to be quiet, I want to meditate, so I go to the exam and do it properly. And this guy be jumping around saying, So there was this guy in my batch who was very keen on the DCM job. And he said, but he was very nervous about doing the test. So when he found out that I had also applied, and our test was on the same day. So he said, yeah, when you go, I'll topo from you. And if we get caught, you don't care because you don't want the job, I'll take this. I'd argue with that logic. So we went with the test, and it so happened that my interview was one day before his. So he said, yeah, why don't you go check questions they asked. So I went there. And then I don't know how many people, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 people take that test. And we finally got down to the last stage that they had 30 people come in. And they were going to give 8 or 12 jobs. So he didn't make it, he went off overseas. I was in that last 30. So then it becomes an ego problem. If you want that far, you want to know whether you can touch the end. And so I went for the thing, and sure enough, I get this telegram saying, you got this job. Remember in 1970 when I graduated, 950 rupees a month was a lot of money, especially in Delhi, because my parents were there, so I was staying at home. 5 rupees was a cup of coffee at the coffee shop in the Ubud. So, so you can imagine 950 rupees was a lot of money. In fact, my dad sent me a telegram saying it took me 10 years to get to 4-figure salary and all that stuff. But the bottom reason why I stayed back was I had decided who I wanted to get married to. Basically, she was the sister of a good friend of mine. And that's another story, but I talked to her father. And he said, "It's crazy, I can't get my daughter married to someone who doesn't have a job." So he said, "You have to have a confirmed job before I get my daughter married." So I talked to my now wife at that time. So I said, "Look, I'm going abroad, and 7 years later I'll do my PhD, I'll get a job, then I'll come back and we'll get married." And she said, "If there's pressure from the family, I don't know," and all that. So I always claim that's how I became an entrepreneur. Because I decided to have this DCM job, I'm not going to take it. I'll get confirmed a year later, I'll get married, and then I'll go to Stanford and do my PhD. Because once you're married, no one objects. So that's how I became an entrepreneur. So I took the biggest decision of my life, actually, on something like that. And sure enough, I got confirmed on 14th September, I got married on 8th October. But the logic was, forget good dates, bad dates. If you don't get us married, we'll go. So, so we did get married. Best decision of my life, by the way. Other than that, we've seen. But bottom line that happened in DCM was they decided to get into electronics. And for some reason they felt that you needed an electronics degree to do well in that line, right or wrong is a different thing. And in this conglomerate, and DCM was, textiles, fertilizers, food, vanaspati is what they used to make, chemicals, tire cord. They didn't have too many electronics engineers. So 1 year out of college, I was called to the big boss's room, and he basically said, "You're going to head sales and marketing." And I had to go and buy a calculator because I didn't know what this marketing was. I never heard it before. I was an engineer, doing engineering. So, because it was a completely new field, because I was getting a lot of responsibility, I decided to stay on. So I had actually written to Stanford to defer my admission. And they said, "Yeah, we'll give you admission, no problems, but you'll have to reapply for aid." And I thought I had good GRE score, so I'll get my aid. And I actually kept it open for 6 years. Right, after that they said, "You have to do your GRE again." Really? But basically, DCM was the pioneer in electronics. They started electronic calculators. We then moved from electronic calculators to programmable calculators. In fact, a lot of you have met Ajay Chaudhary. So I recruited Ajay he's from Jabalpur Engineering College. So I recruited him in sales when he was 72 guy. So straight out of college, Ajay was one of the guys we recruited to help us in sales. And we're really having fun in DCM. In fact, they were the largest in the country. We were doing, it wasn't very big, it was a 2 crore division, but doing really well. And we moved from calculators to electronic calculators to programmable electronic calculators. And then made our own, we had our own R&D. We did some really interesting things there. And then we made a bit slice computer. Now those were the days when India was a very obviously socialist country. And we had an act on the monopolies and restricted trade taxes. You may have heard MRT. And basically the Monopolies Act was very clear that big private companies weren't allowed to go into new areas. Either public sector companies had to go there, or small scale people were allowed to go. Now, none of you have worked in a big company, but please remember one thing, in a large company, there are departments like finance and legal whose job it is to tell you why you can't do something. They never tell you how you can do something. So sure enough in DCM, when they asked legal said no way you can get into computers. And we tried like hell to tell them a programmable calculator and a computer is no different. I mean, you write a program here, you write a program there. Out here you write the program through a keyboard. Then you write it through a language like BASIC or Fortran or Codo or whatever. It's really no different. But no. So DCM decided they weren't going to get into computers, which is where a number of us in that department, it was called DCM Data Products, figured that look, microprocessors are coming out. So I thought they were going to change the world, which they did. Then why don't we do this on our own? You got to remember, no business plan, no money. Right? I mean, you just thought you knew the market and you thought that the technology was going to make a difference. So ultimately, 6 of us left and decided to get into computers. Right? Again, no money meant, where do I generate the money? We decided to trade in calculators. Again, we didn't decide. We thought we'd make calculators and make money and invest that money and work on the computer. What happened is when we left, and you heard Televista, the TV company. So there was a gentleman called Ved Luthra, he passed away now. He was the MD of Televista. He came to us and said, look, I make calculators, they don't sell. So why do you want to manufacture? You take calculators from me, I'll make them for you. You just go and sell them. And we split I'll tell you my cost of manufacturing, you tell me your cost of sales. And we split the profit in the middle. And what I'll do is I'll give you the machines for 90 days on what is called a hundi. And after 90 days, we'll, square. So technically, we got a line of credit. We got a manufacturing facility. So we went out and sold Televista calculators. I think we started in October 75. Since there were 6 of us, and we felt, you're starting a company. You had to go to Bombay, by the way. Bombay was 60% of the market in those days. So the money we could put together amongst ourselves with all our savings was 1,75,000. Out of which 1,25,000 went to buy an office in Bombay. Because you can't operate in Bombay without an office. So really our working capital was 50,000. Right, so we went out. Because we had credit, we were able to sell these calculators, make some money. And by March 76, which is 6 months after we started, we decided we made enough money to invest in developing our own computers. So that's what we did. Initially, since there were 6 of us, we opened only 3 offices. Delhi, Bombay and Calcutta. Ajay and Yogesh went to Bombay. Mummy and I went to Calcutta, and Subash and Shiv stayed in Delhi. And then in March, we decided Shiv and I would get into the computer business. And Ajay moved from Bombay to Madras to open up a South office. And now we had 4 offices and the computer part. And the Delhi office was my grandmother's prasadi. We took it for 2 reasons. One is it was free, so that's very good deal. And second was it's in a place called Golflinks in Delhi. I don't know if you know Delhi, but it's a slightly posh address. So we thought if you have a posh address, people might think you're money, and so, it gives your company a little more credibility. So that's basically, and I'm sure Arya would have told you part of the story if he's talking. But that's basically how it started. The funny thing is, when we developed our computer, we were told you need a license. That's how naive we were. Said, what do you mean you need a license? Because by that time the government had reserved all licenses for computer manufacturing to go to state or public sector. So we ended up doing a joint sector with UP Electronics Corporation because they had a license. Which is why HCL is in Noida, not in Delhi. Because Noida had just opened up. It was in UP and it was Delhi for all practical purposes. So we really were the first company that went into Noida. We were in sheds. I still remember G8, G9 sector. We had to, and there was another with a wooden plank, and we had to cross that going. But that's how basically we we got the license from them. Again, initially we made a programmable calculator, 4-bit PPS 4-bit Rockwell chip programmable calculator. The news on the other side was, in the meanwhile, DCM decided to get into computers after all this had happened. So when we were making our computer, we had actually by that time taken a number of the R&D people and all that out. We knew their machine better than they knew their machine because they are all new people. And we knew what the problems in that machine. So when we had to go to sell, we'd ask the guy to call the DCM guys for a demonstration. And then we tell him he didn't have this, he didn't have that, he didn't have that, we'll have those. That's basically how it works. Good news is, I mean, I'm not going to go into all the boring details, but the good news is, excuse me, I think we got a HCL per se was formed as a joint venture in August of 76. By June of 77, we had more machines in the market, programmable calculators in the market than DCM. So we had a larger installed base, basically. So after that, big company, small company, doesn't matter. Actually, they made a mistake. Their product was priced at 33,000 rupees. We realized that our main market was scientific institutions, IIT departments, and the head of department budget was 25,000 in those days. The minute you went about 25,000, the purchase process took a much bigger route because it then had to go beyond the head of department. And DCM had the magnetic card reader built into the product. So it was 35,000 rupees for them, for the calculator, the programmable calculator and the magnetic card reader. We kept the magnetic card reader outside. And so we had 23,000 for the machine, 10,000 for the magnetic card reader. And we had something called, which was unique to us, called a user-definable keys, which you could pre-program and it would remember that program with a single key press. So if you wanted a hyperbolic sign, for example, and you needed to use that quite often, or you wanted to do regression analysis and you needed to use that quite often, or you want to do a 3x3 matrix inversion and you needed to use that quite often, you could press one key and get it done. So you could user-definable keys. And basically, all machines came with user-definable keys. We used to just break on the printed circuit board below it, we break that connection. And if you order it, we put the connection. That's technically out. But that was 2,000 rupees. So we had, for 35,000, we gave you the whole machine that DCM had, plus a few extra things. Now, I was talking to the executive director later. He said that his people told him there's no way HCL was going to deliver the machine before 31st March. Again, government departments, if you don't deliver 31st March, their funds lapse. So they'll buy something else. And so they didn't reduce their price. Because if they reduced the price, they would have squeezed us. Right? We had a lot of orders, and I think between 28th and 31st March, we delivered them all. But we just about did it with the skin of our teeth. Then, of course, once our machine worked and they had some really nice features, like you could do error correction, and there were some very nice different features. We obviously outsold. And then everyone came in the market with what are called 8-bit computers. Now, our first 8-bit computer was announced sometime in August 77. DCM had a machine ready. We had obviously developed, they had it ready, a 16-bit machine. But he said that his people told him there's no way these guys can do an 8-bit machine that quickly. And there wasn't anyway. We had pre-announced it. Because IBM was leaving India, and so we thought it's nice to tell people they have an alternative. So DCM didn't take out the machine they had. He said, no, last time you told me and it was wrong, so I don't believe you this time. So they went out to get a new 8-bit machine. And they thought they'll get a kit from overseas and put it out. So now think the 4th largest company in the country is taking out ads saying, wait, don't buy a computer right now, we are coming with our computer. Right? And here's this startup that doesn't have any funding or anything. It just, in a way, it sort of worked in our favor. Because we went out to say they're scared. Who are they scared of? They're scared of us. So, we got to be something. You think we are a small company? Yeah, but, big companies are scared of us. And that's really what built HCL. And in a way, that's the culture that got built in all the sales people. That they felt that they were fighting the world. And that everyone else was against them. And that really, sort of built what we did and how we did it. How we motivated our people. Also, you got to remember, in those days, like today, folks from L&T and all come to me and crib about they can't recruit because no one wants to go on a construction job, work on site and stuff like that. Those days, the problem was we couldn't recruit for IT. Because parents used to tell their kids work for Hindustan Levers, work for Larsen and Toubro. Those were the jobs that everyone wanted, not working for an IT company. So we had the people who joined us were really the risk takers. The people who felt that they wanted to do something that was completely new, that would be different. Which is why you see a lot of, very successful people today who are folks who came out of the IT industry. Because they were the risk takers who went in there in the first place. It's not that people who went to Levers and all didn't do well. But disproportionately, I think the IT industry has produced more CEOs, entrepreneurs than probably any other industry, only because the risk takers went to IT when it started in the 70s and 80s. Right. So that's basically how we did it in HCL. I mean, I can give you a lot of stories. When we made our first 8-bit machine, just to tell you what the environment was like, the way we used to do it at that time, we used to take 30% advance, because that covered a bill of materials. There used to be nice margins in hardware that don't exist today. And then 70%, the guy would come with the check on delivery, and we would give. So we had our machine ready, the customer was ready with the check. So we were going to fix a date for him to come to the factory and cut the ribbon and take the delivery. Our first 8-bit machine. Then someone woke up in the factory and says, have you paid your excise? What's this excise? He said, there is a production tax in India called excise. So anytime you produce anything, you've got to pay an excise. The excise could be ad valorem, which is a percentage of the price, or it could be by weight. For example, today on transformers, you pay 4 annas per kilo by weight of the transformer. Right. On certain things, you pay 10% ad valorem, which is 10% of the, if your selling price is 100, excise is 10, so it becomes 100. So we called the excise inspector. We had enough margins, so it didn't really matter what it was going to be, 10, 15, whatever. So we asked him, hey, what's our classification so that we can pay excise? So this guy looked through the whole manual and he said, no classification for a mini computer, microprocessor, race, there's no classification. I said, then how do I pay excise? So he said, I'll tell you what, you have to write a letter to your administrative ministry. And then the administrative ministry writes to the finance ministry. And then the finance ministry tells you how to do it. You told him you're mad, I got customers who are waiting to deliver, this writing to ministry is going to take 3-4 months. He said, no. This is revenue generating for the government. They will do it in Monday. So he said, okay. So at that time, Department of Electronics, we call it DOE in short, had just been formed because the government was going to do electronics in the future. And they were an administrative ministry. We used to work Saturday half days, now times have changed. So we wrote a letter and we went to meet DOE on a Saturday, I still remember. And so he gave them a full presentation from them on problem and said, please write to the Ministry of Finance. So DOE said, how? The microprocessor policy has still not been decided. We expect it to take 4 years. So please come back 4 years later and then we'll take action on your report. Then you please maybe have decided the policy, I've got a machine ready, I've got a customer ready, I've taken advance. They said, sorry, we can't do anything till the microprocessor policy is decided. So we go back that Saturday afternoon, really depressed. Now either I have to do something illegal or I have to, I don't know how I'm going to get this computer out of the factory. So we all take the excise book home. I forget who, but India used to be a big very big for import substitution in those days. So anytime you imported something, they immediately put it into the excise book, so that if someone made it in India, you could save that foreign exchange. So while going through the book, there was this, it was from East Germany, Obertron. It was the accounting invoicing machine. And so there was a picture of it, fortunately. It had a display, a small display, it had a keyboard and had a printer. Right, so we showed the exercise guy and said, hey, display, keyboard, printer, display, keyboard. Yeah, this is so for 4 years, we actually took it out as a accounting invoicing machine. Right? We even sold one to Department of Electronics. That policy didn't take 4 years. So, I just tried to give you an idea of what was happening in those days and what you had to live through when you were doing things. Things have changed now. You don't have a license large anymore. Yeah, it was a lot. But yeah, those are some of the things that we had to do when we started. Just continuing on my story. So, it was fun. All this was, so actually when I started the company, I was married, I had a kid. So I told my wife that, look, I'm going to be tied up, long hours, all that stuff. Fortunately, we were living with my parents, so I wasn't worried about who to look after the kids because she was working too. And, my logic was, look, there are 3 people earning in the family. I was the 4th. I don't have a salary for a year, that's okay. In fact, your lifestyle to some extent, but where was the time to enjoy that lifestyle? And if it didn't work out, I was pretty sure I could get a job back with my earlier salary or more. And all you'd have is a little mud on your face or a lot of mud. Fortunately, the company worked. And of course, I've got to tell you what happens in families. Everyone, my parents were very nice, they didn't say anything. But all my uncles and aunts were very clear, Basil hai, I'm speaking a little Hindi, badi company, he's doing well, secure job, no one's done business in the family, all that kind of stuff. 3-4 years later, the company is doing very well, they all took credit for it. They all said, I told you sometimes you should have recorded what they said earlier. The other thing we used to do was, because everyone used to ask, why are you doing this and all that. So at least my way of telling people was, why are you doing this? Said, you're going to change the world. To change the world means you're probably on pot or something, so now no one can discuss it with you. Because it's such a nebulous concept about changing the world. But our basic, internally, our target was, we used to say we want to have a fertilizer plant in 10 years. Now, what is the fertilizer plant? ECM's most profitable unit was that fertilizer plant in Kota. And the turnover there was 100 crores. So the logic was, look, I want to do 100 crores in 10 years. And basically have the profitability of that fertilizer. That was the logic. It actually translated into a target once the company started doing well. And we did do 10 crores in 10 years. And then the target became 100 crores in 10 years after. And then it was 1,000 crores in 10 years after. And they were on that cycle till 1,000 crores. I left after that, so I don't know what the numbers are, but they were doing pretty well on that particular target. But my wife, after 3-4 years, the company was doing well. By that time, kid number 2 had arrived also. So my wife tells me one day that, you've got to spend some time with the kids. They're growing up, they hardly know you, all that. So, I told her, I still remember, I told her, look, I'm having too much fun. So right now, I'm having fun, so let me do what I'm doing. But I think on my 10th wedding anniversary, I took her out for dinner and she said, it feels really good. It feels like our 3rd wedding anniversary. I said, I must be doing something right. How come? She said, no, I'm counting the days you've been around. So it was, but it was fun. And that's what startups do. Ultimately, they take you over completely. So my thing when I started the company, my conviction conviction to myself was that I'm doing this because I want the economic freedom to do what I want to do. At that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I said, when I know what I want to do, I want to have the economic freedom to be able to do it. That was my logic. And you have to convince yourself why you're doing something. So many years later, I think when the internet came on, I was 25 or 26 when we started HCL. I was 49 when the internet came about. And at that time, HCL was a big company, public company. But their logic for the internet was, let's wait and see which direction becomes the standard. Then we'll put a lot of investment and go aggressively in that direction. My idea was that, hey, the fun is when it's choosing the direction. That's when technology keeps jumping all over the place. That's where you have fun going in there trying to see what is the thing you want to do. So that was my big dilemma at that time. That hey, am I becoming a slave to what I've created? Should I stay on and do what I'm doing? It's a lot of fun. It's a lot it's working fine. Or should I go back to my first principles that I said, hey, I have to have the economic freedom to do what I want to do. Now I think I know what I want to do. Oh, I think this is what I want to do. I have the economic freedom. So what will I choose? So that's when I decided to leave 98, early 98, and say, hey, let me go and fool around on the internet. It so happened. I'll come back to what happened then. But I was talking about my brother-in-law. So, like, he was sort of my wing for 5 years, next room to me. His trip in life was, he said, I don't care what I want to do, I want to make money. So, out of our whole group, all of us did our GRE. He was the only one who did what we call GMAT today. It was called ATGSP, an advanced test for graduate study in business. Right? He was the only one who did it. And we have a laugh. He's in the US, we meet quite often. Well, not too often, but he's now a professor at MIT. So, it's fun when you look back and say, look at this whole thing about, hey, he wanted to make money, that was the only thing of life. I wanted to do research. So, I think life is quite funny. You never know which way it's going. But yeah, coming back to so left, and again, things happen that you can't control. So my lawyer, who I was working with to make sure that when I leave HCL is done amicably and stuff, he called me one day at his office and said, personal favor, if you want to do it, you can say no and all that. He said his tennis partner was also a classmate of his from school, wanted to talk. So this guy was trying to broker, Goldman Sachs wanted to invest in this business in India, the IT services business. And he was trying to broker that deal. But they said that unless they have someone to do industry due diligence, they're not going to look at this area at all. So he wanted to know if I would consult with them to do that industry due diligence. And so I told him, as long as I'm part of HCL, I can't do it. But when I leave HCL, I'm happy to do it. So it pretty much was when I signed off with HCL, I was in New York, I walked across a couple of blocks and signed my consulting agreement with Goldman. And then came in and did some due diligence for them in India. The problem with India in those days was that we had a myriad of laws. And there was no way you could be squeaky clean. Because technically there was a law called FARA. It had lots of teeth. But one of the clauses in the law was that if you have a overseas receivable, someone owes you money from abroad and doesn't pay you for 180 days. Let's say the payment came on day 185. If you hadn't gone legal on day 181, you were in contravention of FARA. Okay. Now, and there were a number of laws like this. So Goldman Sachs saw a number of companies that they wanted to invest in. But they wanted a quote-unquote a squeaky clean. There were no companies in India that were squeaky clean. They couldn't be because there were too many of these laws that were illogical or sometimes contravened each other. So after doing this for, I think 3 or 4 months, I told them, look, I'm wasting my time. You're not going to invest. and this is just a waste of time. Plus, you're paying me what I was paid for the whole month for working 4 days a month. I'm not used to it. Right? And another thing that happened is, after I left, I was working from home. That lasted only 10 days. My wife sat me down and she basically said, look, I married you for good or bad, but I didn't marry you for lunch. So get the hell out of here. This house has run without you for 27 years. Right? I'll pay for your business center. Go work for a business center. But you're sitting in the house saying, why is this here? Why is that there? Why is this not there? It isn't going to work. So that was the end of sitting at home. So once you had a business center, then we start looking at doing other things instead of, just saying I'll meet people and I'll do whatever you do. So one thing led to the other. Goldman said, but we do want to get into this sector. So I said the only way you'll get a squeaky clean company is if you start a new one and keep it squeaky clean. So they said, okay, why don't you find some people who start it? So I had two of my colleagues from HCL who had left and started their own company. They kept telling me, come in and become a chairman and all that. And I figured they didn't need a chairman, they needed some money. And I wasn't going to add too much value by telling them what to do because they knew what. So I called them up and said, hey, I've got Goldman here, they're willing to put in money, give me a business. So when people hear the word Goldman, they make a big business plan. So they pulled in two or three more people we knew from HCL who also left. And then they made this big business plan. Ultimately, it needed someone to run it, so I ended up getting involved. That was TechSpan. We got a funding in late 1998. We started it, we went to market in early 91. 1st January 99, sorry. That was when the bubble was around. You guys know what a bubble. Dot-com bubble. You heard about it, right? E-commerce bubble. Whatever. So there was a bubble where the whole world thought that brick and mortar stores are going to close down and everything is going to become e-commerce. And so it's what's happening to analytics today. So what happens is the CEO of a company doesn't know what the hell e-commerce is. Right? So, as I used to say, if I had a dead body, I'd get $45. You just needed a body to put on a seat and say, he's writing some program for you for e-commerce. Right? But basically, the market went crazy. I remember there was this girl who used to work for us in HCL. Her husband sold his company, something called Homeward. Revenue was, I think, 3 million. He sold it for some 3 billion in those days. So it was one of those periods. Everyone was going public. Right. No one was making money, everyone was making losses. We had a nice model, we did 15 odd million in 99 calendar. We did 67 million in 2000 calendar. But like a good traditional Indian company, we were making profits. We were supposed to go public. But because we were profitable, we were being discounted. So their logic was, you're not investing enough in the future, for the future. So that went against my grain at least. I come from the old school. Said, to make profit, you get value. You don't make profit, if you make loss, how can you get value? So we decided not to go public, which is fortunate, which is why we survived. And then, of course, end of 2000, the bubble burst and everything went downhill really fast. And of course, Bush became president. That helped. So we waited, and that time the thinking was in 6 months or 3 months things will come back. 6 months things will come back. Unfortunately, in our business, if you stand still, you're actually rolling down the slope. You've got to keep growing. So at some stage, we decided no more standing still, let's do something. And we had $1 million in the bank, which we had very carefully preserved. So we decided that let's focus on one market. We have to choose a market. And for various reasons, we chose the investment banking market or the capital market. And New York became sort of the hub. And we did what I now call, or we called then, something called asset light. What is asset light? So everyone had laid off. Even the big investment banks are laid. So we'd be hanging around these bars in New York, meeting people, someone being laid off from Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, wherever. And we'd also go and talk to people in these places saying, oh, we have domain now. So someone at Morgan Stanley municipal bonds, muni bonds, said, I need some people who know muni bonds. So we remember I was having a drink with that guy from Goldman Sachs, who was from muni bonds, he got laid off. So we go catch that guy and say, come in with us as a pre-sales on this call to tell them that we've got this know-how. And if we get the order, I'll give you. So it's called asset light. Because you were right on the asset till you got it. Right. Worked really well with us. We got some, we didn't get some. But after the bubble went away, things came back to normal. All these people got re-recruited. But they all remembered that we had tried to help them. So when they got into whichever company they got into, they called us and said, hey, you guys help me, I want to try and help you. Can you give me some people to do this work or that work? And that worked really well. So that was one thing that happened. Other thing that happened was, there was a setup here in India, in Bangalore and in Bombay and then by a European investment bank called DRKW. They had set up a subsidiary called WebTech. Their CIO was a guy called Arjun Malhotra. He's now the CIO of British Telecom. He recruited only from the IITs. He recruited JE rank less than 300. And while the normal salaries at that time were 4 lakhs or 3.5 lakhs, he paid 7 lakhs for people coming out. But he took these people, especially the Bangalore group, and taught them the innards of investment banking. DRKW got bought by Dresdner Bank. Dresdner Bank got bought by Allianz Finance. And Allianz, in their wisdom, through this whole slowdown, decided to become Eurocentric. So they started to close down all their operations in Asia. So we found out 4 days before the last 25 guys in Bangalore were going to get their laid off. So we landed up in Bangalore and did what I call a soft acquisition, which means we gave all these guys jobs from the day they finished their jobs, so they'll get their severance and all that. We took over all the equipment and we took over the lease of that office. Right, it still took us a month to get to that office because the STP took 1 month to change and whatever. So 1 month we operated out of the business center. And basically now I had domain expertise in India, which even Accenture didn't have, no one else. Right. So I became somewhat unique. And that's what we went to the market. So that's how in TechSpan and then in Headstrong, we were able to position ourselves and come up with some unique expertise, which is why we got paid that fancy price. In fact, when we went out, we didn't go to sell the company. We had an investment bank, PE group that had invested, and they were very nice. We wanted to grow the company, they wanted to grow the company. And they basically said that they will, if we can get another PE to give us a valuation, they will give us money at a 10% higher valuation. It is very fair. So we did a limited, we met only 6 companies, 2 PEs, 2 Indian and 2 US, and said, hey, this is our company and if you wanted to buy it, what would you pay? So only 4 of them came back. 2 of them were in the range. So internally we used to have our own bets about kya aega. So we thought anywhere between 350 and 425 is where we'd be valued. The 2 Indian companies came back, one gave a value of 510 to 530 million. The other gave 475 to 550 million. We ended up selling at 550 million, all cash, no term. That was something we thought we'll get 3 years later, 2 years later. So, it was an offer you could refuse, basically. So that's how we ended up selling to Jeff. Both the difference between the two was less than $100,000 finally. So it was a toss-up as to who we got sold. That's how we got out. That's how I got out. I stepped out right after it was sold. The rest of the team is stepping out now. The 2 years is sort of finishing. So don't get surprised if in the next 6 months we end up starting something else. I think I have one more startup. I'm only 65, so I hang up my boots. So that's basically my life. I remember on my 50th birthday or 60th birthday, someone asked me that if you, knowing what you know, if you go back and change something, what will you change? And, I thought other than end up with my parents around and stuff like that, I don't think I'd change it. Pretty much, I've had fun, that's what I wanted to do. I've also discovered that it doesn't matter how much time you spend at home. Now I'm retired, so I spend a lot of time at home, it's still not enough. So ultimately you have to decide on your balance. That's a war you're not going to win. So, it's perpetual. You have to come to some balance. You can't spend more time with it. Don't let that burn the hell out of you. So that's basically what I've been doing. It's been a pretty simple life. I've been in this industry for a while. I'm starting, the professor was asking me, what are you looking at nowadays? So, this whole healthcare thing is really interesting. How should I put it? I get my old IIT Kharagpur alumni or old HCL alumni is where I get my deal flow. So I get involved with them and involved in 3 startups right now. One is out in Hyderabad, called Map My Genome. Gives you what is called a genome patri. So like a genome patri tells you about your fate, a genome patri tells you about your health based on your genes. There's another startup out in Lucknow actually of all places and the US that does electronic medical records. So they've got already over 1 million people whose records they've done. They're probably hoping to get to some 15-20 million by the end of 2014. Then there's another company out in Austin, Texas, which is very interesting. It's called Total Zero. So the concept is really nice. So what they say is that they'll give you a 4G speed or a 2G network. So the logic is, when you download a big file, it normally takes time. It doesn't matter how fast your network is. So what they do is they have a piece of software up in the cloud, which takes your unstructured data. Not everything, so I'm trying to make it simple. But takes this unstructured data, which is what your file is, and converts it to structured data, which is an image, and downloads the first page immediately. So while you're reading the first page, the rest of it downloads. So perception becomes reality. You think it downloaded really fast. Right, so that's stage 1. Stage 2 is they're now trying to see if you can make changes on that image, and those changes will go back and get done on the unstructured data which is up in the cloud somewhere. Now that's really useful because of 2 things. One is that it doesn't matter what your device is. Your device could be a smartphone, a tablet, a notebook, a laptop, whatever. When you put it off, there's nothing left on it. There's no file downloaded or anything because an image that went back, that vanishes when you put it off. So if it gets stolen, the corporation doesn't lose it. So all this stuff you read about, Coca-Cola laptop got stolen, so many thousand records, right, and all that stuff, won't happen from a security point of view. Because it's all in the cloud, it's like having a mainframe. So, interesting concept in today's world. So they are at startup phase, they should be getting the first round funding any day now. I think they've got the term sheet, they've got negotiating the funding. So it's fun. Most of them are good engineers. They know what to do. They know what to do. They don't know how to do. So ultimately, what we try and tell them to do, get them a team that will help them take what they have to deliver the results that they do. So most of them just have no idea. And today you don't have the time like we had in our time to make mistakes and then get up and run again. You don't have that luxury. There's just too much pressure. The ecosystem is. There are enough people with the same idea, and the ecosystem is giving them enough money to be able to A, do it, and B, get the people to help you take it to the next level. Also, how do I put it? I'm a strong believer in not doing startups just to make money. I think that's the wrong reason, and probably if you do that, in my view, it's not going to work. Right? You've got to have a passion. You've got to want to change the world. You've got to want to make a difference in some form. And that passion then converts to whatever you're doing. And wealth generation comes automatically if you're successful. But technically, if you have a passion and you do it well, and let me assume it's not financially too successful, it's still very satisfying. And that itself has its own advantages. But I look at it, ladies will excuse me, but money is like girls. If you run after it, you'll run away from it. So, don't worry about the money. The money will happen as a byproduct. I still remember, we had our 10th anniversary at HCL. HCL by that time had become the largest computer company in India. We went to Udaipur, having fun, lots of drinks. On this boat, they have the boat that goes out to the lake. And we're sitting and talking about, what we've done in these 10 years. It was funny, the conclusion we came to is that we had 1,75,000 rupees to invest. We put 125 into that Nariman Fund office in Bombay. And we put 50,000 into the fund. 10 years later, the return from that 125 is better than the return from that 50,000. From a wealth point of view. It's why you say in the old days, why did people put money into property? That if you cut out all the taxes paid and the salaries and all that stuff, just from a pure wealth creation or return, that 125 in Nariman Point gave a better return than the 50,000. That of course changed 20 years after we started, when things changed a lot. But for the first 20 years, none of the founders saw any real wealth creation. We were all on a salary. And in a way, when we started, since we were going to different places, everyone very clear that look, we'll keep it all transparent and keep it clean and all that stuff. And it's very easy to do because there's no money. So, you can discuss concepts very easily. When the company started doing well, there was obviously some discussion about, hey, we might as well improve our quality of life. And you couldn't do it through salaries because taxes were like 70% or something in those days. And then we thought about it and said, are we crazy? We are getting all these good guys who come and work for us only because they know we are a professional company that's clean, we are transparent, everything is open. If we start taking money like everyone else, I'm not going to be able to retain these guys or get these guys. And so took the decision that look, I'm not going to kill the goose that's laying the golden egg, so to say. So I might as well keep the company clean, which I think is the biggest thing HCL did. But they actually gave a model to the industry that said that if you keep yourself clean and transparent, you are likely to grow. Which is, if you see all the big companies, whether it's an Infosys or Wipro or whatever, that's how they do it. That's how they get business. Earlier, Indian family business was not that. There was always, when you went to a 5-star hotel, the only people who could go there were people who had quote-unquote black money, or people who had an expense account from their office. Right? That changed. I remember when we went to IIT Patna to do our first recruitment, my salary used to be 2,000 rupees in those days. We decided that we take these guys from IIM at 2,000 rupees, which was a substantial part of your cash. And Shiv and I had gone, Shiv and basically the rule was, if I had to turn around and ask him that, do you think something, that was a reject. Because at that salary I couldn't afford to have even the slightest doubt. And of course when we went to IIM Cal, no one had heard of us. So when we went there for our pre-placement talk, we generally told people that this is not a job, this is an adventure. I don't know if I'm going to be around 1 year from now. But what you learn in that 1 year or a few months before, if you're not around, will be more than what you learn anywhere else. And it's funny, out of that class of 120, some 110 people applied. And we ended up taking 6 of them. In fact, I talked to Vijay Louis, sometimes she was in that batch. And she still says, I wish I'd applied. I keep telling her, you're crazy, I wish. But, that was I think that was our passion, that we were able to communicate to these kids at IIT at that time. They weren't kids anymore. Most of them were, I was a 70 graduate, most of them were 74 graduates. So they would have been first year in my family. Right, we had a 5-year program. But that was so ultimately when you're doing a company, first of all, you've got to have passion. Obviously, you've got to have an idea that makes sense. It can't be a niche, because everything changes, as I'm trying to explain to you as you go along. So you better be in a market that's large, so if it changes, you've got enough leeway to be able to make that move. Third is get a team. You can't do it alone. It's very difficult. It's nearly impossible to do it alone. And fourth is, this is tough for IIT to swallow, but try and recruit people who are smarter than you. They exist, by the way. And then, please listen to them. If you recruit smart people, you have to listen to them. You can't recruit smart people and treat them like class. Right? The other thing I've got to say is, if you're an entrepreneur, you can't have an ego. And I get asked this question all the time, but Larry Ellison has an ego. Larry Ellison is not an entrepreneur today. He may have been an entrepreneur earlier. Because as an entrepreneur, you take lots of decisions. A lot of them are wrong. And you have to say I'm wrong and turn around really quickly. If you sit in your ego, the cost of not turning around quickly is quite high, especially when you're a startup. And we were just discussing before we came up, the comic was saying how different it is being a dean at IIT Kharagpur, which is a running institute, right? I would equate with Hewlett Packard or one of those companies, to starting something new here, which is a startup. So he said everything I had to take a decision, which is exactly what's there in a startup. Which pencil to buy, which bag to buy, how many to buy, how to control your costs. Everything is decision you got. And the good news is you've got a small team. You take the wrong decision, you call them into a room, say let's do this, you step out of the room, everyone does that. Company gets bigger. I remember I got in 1980, 5 years after we started, company had got really big. By the time you sent a circular, in those days you had to type it and mail it. By the time you sent a circular and got implemented, it took 30 days for it to get implemented. It was quite frustrating, for me at least. I was used to that startup, I was used to telling people, let's do this and it get done. So I actually went back and talked to everyone and said, it was 85, so 10 years after. I said, hey, I'm going to go back and do my PhD and get back to our and everyone told me you're crazy and all that. So finally I said, okay, I had a cottage in Missouri that I bought because my son was that good. I said I'm going to take 6 months off. I'm going to go to Missouri and I'll sit there and I'll think about what I want to do and then I'll come back and tell everyone. So everyone said, you'll be as confused at the end of those 3 or 6 months as you are right now. Probably more confused. In hindsight, if you think of it, it's probably true. So finally he said, look, why don't you go do a management course at Harvard. You'll get time to think, you'll also learn something, and then come back and decide. So I did what's called the Advanced Management Program at the Harvard Business School. It used to be a 13-week program in early 1985. And three things. One is that living a bohemian student existence with money in your pocket is a hell of an experience. Right? Second is, you realize that you need to talk to people who don't have an agenda, who in your mind don't have an agenda. They hardly know you and you can talk to them. And the third thing I realized was that for the first time after I left college, I left my guard down. And I didn't even know I had my guard down. I left my guard down enough to make friends. Otherwise it's very difficult to make friends after you. Because you always think what is the agenda, all that kind of thing. So that was a great experience for me. So when I came back, I actually said I don't want to do what I've been doing. I don't want to run the computer division anymore. I want to do startups. So we put a structure in the company where we said we'll do a startup like a startup, except that Internal Finance will give you a budget. You can draw from it. If you exceed the budget, then it has to go back to the board. It started fine because that's, you have the startup, it's still part of the business. But everyone said, hey, you can't only have fun. So the decision was that, okay, you do the startups, but if any division runs into a problem, then it's your baby. So I thought that was fair. I can't only have fun. I want you to take some responsibility. So that's the time we started what was then called the CAD-CAM division. Right? Repro ran into a problem, our reprographics division did that. I don't know if you remember, we did the first comparative analysis, saying Modi Xerox says this, we have this, first, and there was a lot of ethics discussion on that, whether it's ethical, not ethical, all that stuff. I still claim we got some 20x our return on that money we spent on that comparative analysis. Right. And then we had a problem in HCL America. That's how I went to the US in 89. Basically I went there I was told to shut down that thing quietly. Because we've taken a lot of mileage in India, saying, brain drain, Indian computers go abroad and all that stuff. And obviously built an image on that. Because we were going to do hardware manufacturing in the US. And we ran into a problem because we had this big order. I can give you the whole story, but they got acquired and then they wanted it only on the Intel chip, we were on a Motorola chip, all that kind of thing. And that actually is funny. When I sat there, I decided to close it down. So I had 11 people in hardware, I laid them off. I called my software guys and said, we're closing this down. The next day, I called for a meeting, they wanted to meet me. And they said, we're not going back to India with a deal between our legs. Exactly. I said, boss, you tell us what to do, and, we'll do it. So I came back home and told my wife, it's crazy. I have stock in the company. And I am ready to throw in the towel. And these guys, they are saying, just tell me what to do. I want to still fight. And so we changed the whole model. We decided, instead of hardware, let's get into services. And that's what we do at HCL Technologies. That is simple. All of it wasn't, we just say, okay, let's do services. And we the whole story, it becomes a long story. But basically, when you went to the US with hardware, and we had a multiprocessor Unix box that ran to a user, it was single user Unix, but internally there was a multiprocessor. So it gave you that advantage. Now, when you go to the US, you got to get UL certification, all that kind of stuff. But you also needed the enabling technologies to work on that computer. So I needed a Informix database, a unified database, I needed a microfocus compiler, etc., to work on my machine and take advantage of my multiprocessor. But to do that, I have to write multiprocessor extensions on that enabling technology, whether it's a database or a compiler. So that normally they charge you for porting. That's called porting on your machine. Our deal with them is I'll give you my engineers free because they understand these multiprocessor extensions. But the IP is yours. So I'll do the IP for you free at my cost, but I won't pay you for it. So when we decided to get out of hardware, I told these guys I don't need to give you my engineer. I don't need it anymore, so I'm putting my engineers back. They all came back and said, hey, we need it, we'll pay you for this. And so I suddenly had a business. I was generating a fair amount of cash flow, which we then decided to expand. So it's not that I had a great idea and whatever happened, it landed in my lap. And I felt, hey, I looked at the numbers and we said, this is going to work. So that's how we stayed. The two hardware guys we had from India, what we decided with them was, I told them, look, you find a way of making yourself cash neutral during the year, so that your salaries come out of some consulting work you do. One of them, actually we signed a big deal with Cisco. First time Cisco was coming to India. The project didn't take off for a few months. When I talked to them, said, what's going on? They said, until we have someone who can manage this whole India thing, we can't do this. So I gave him one of my hardware guys who actually allowed us to start that. And then he came, he was head of Cisco here, Cisco Labs here for a couple of years. He's now back in the Bay Area. The other guy is sold his first company to L&T Infotech. He's got started his second one. So actually he created those two. So Cisco is another great story. So they were giving us the iOS operating system that we were supposed to maintain, enhance, etc. Big problem because the Department of Defense in the US uses it. Desert Storm was run on that Cisco network using that operating system. A lot of financial institutions use it. So they didn't get clearance. Department of Commerce in the US didn't give them clearance to give us the operating system source so that we could work on it. So the clearance said that has to be in a Cisco facility. So now I'm going to tell you how Jugaad is. So we rented one room in our office to Cisco. Okay. We put two of these machines that were encryption machines. That cost about $300. Cisco put, right? With a switch externally. So if one machine went down, we could throw the switch, the other one would work, and work would continue at the center. And there was a Navta lock on the door to this room. And the key of that lock was with some Cisco employee in the Bay Area. So every time you called him, he would fly down with the key, open the lock, repair this, lock it and go back. That's how Cisco started this. That's how we got around Department of Commerce restriction about it had to be in a Cisco facility. So the idea is that when you have a problem, as long as you're not doing anything illegal, there is a solution. If you can think of it. Don't let the problems do it. And I think the excise example, this example are both from that area. I think that was one reason why HCL did what it did was that was our help. Like, hey, I'm not going to take no for an answer. So I've got to find a way to get around this. I'd be very happy to answer questions if you have any. And feel free to ask me whatever you want. If I don't want to answer it, I can. Sure.
Sir, I'm Gurdeep from Kothia. I want to know about how is it working in a startup in someone else's startup, not yours? What's the difference?
So, see, when you work in a startup, you've got to be a believer. You just don't work in a startup like you work in a Hewlett Packard because you're going to office every day. Right? So, that's the first difference. Right? You've got to be involved. Otherwise, you're a pain in the butt. No one wants you there. And they'll get you, if they're smart, they'll get you out. So, you've got to be involved. You've got to feel a part of it. Now, whether you're a founder or not is a completely different. Right? A lot of people don't want to be founders, don't want to get involved with the startup, still have enough options that they want that hopefully will make them wealthy at some point or someday. Right? And then there's no problem. I mean, it's just a question of how you do it. But you can't go into a startup as if you're working with an HP or an IBM. It won't work. If I was in the startup and I saw someone who had that attitude, I'd get them out. But I don't have time to manage people. I need people to be self-motivated in a startup. I have no time to spend on it. Yes, as the organization grows, my job goes away from doing this everyday transaction decision to actually managing people, motivating them to put in their best. But that is the transition over time. So, as I always say, 0 to 5 is one. 5 to 20 is another. 20 to 50 is another phase. 50 to 100 is another. And each of them requires slightly different way of how you're going to do things. And again, the numbers are not sacrosanct. I'm talking about the IT services industry. Products, the numbers could be different. But basically there are 3 or 4 steps which how you look at company. And a lot of people, I don't want to run a company that's 200 million. That's not what excites me. I'm much happier to do a 0 to 20. To me, that's the most exciting thing. The best analogy I can give is like, you will relate to it, but it's like bringing up a kid. The first 2, 3 years, 4 years are the most interesting. But every day is something new gets done. Then they become teenagers, then it gets to be a problem. You got to manage them, spend a lot of time managing stuff that people who are being, in your mind, students. And then when they grow up, they become friends. And then it works very different. So it's very similar. Also, don't want to ever run a public company. Because, again, I'll give another analogy. Going public is like getting married. All the hard work starts after that. You know?
I know this question has been asked from entrepreneurs colleges, but anyway, I'm going to ask it because I quit in first good answer. Can you please tell me one perfect litmus paper test to actually test whether an idea that I have in my brain or in my mind is perfect or not?
Try and get money. If someone's willing to put in money, then they believe in it. That's a pretty simple way to find out. If you can raise money, then there are other people who believe in the idea, then obviously it should have some money. Doesn't necessarily mean it's still a great idea, but at least it gets you to stay. And not from family man.
You went through a very bad phase in 1989. HCL was like, in 1987 to 89 it was going through a bad phase, and then again in 2001, as you say. What goes in the whole, the mindset that how do you manage things when the things are going bad, and you are not looking at how far you are looking at that moment, and what the strategies that at that time about what next to do. How does that what next to do affects when you are in a good phase and in a bad phase?
So I don't think there's a general answer to that, and I can do that, but it's not going to give you any insight as to what needs to be done. Books you can read it. But what happened in 87, we were in the copier business. Modi Xerox was in the copies business. They were selling per copy. They should give their copier free, and you paid them per copy. We were selling copiers, and then you bought the consumables, basically. What happened was, we were doing okay. Till 1 month, it just changed abruptly. And all of a sudden, the division that was making money started losing money like crazy. Right? That's when we sort of realized that we were in the wrong business. That the copies business was actually what people wanted. We were trying to sell hardware. Right? Obviously, the hardware had to go, but they didn't want the hardware, they wanted the copies. And it was actually much more profitable, But the whole process was different. I didn't need salesmen to sell it. I needed people to, salesmen to sell the concept. But I needed people to go every week, every month to read the meter and give a bill, that kind of stuff. So when I took over, the first thing I noticed was that I had a very demotivated team. Because everyone blamed the team for the fiasco. No one blamed the strategy. The board's never going to say, oh, we didn't see this. So ultimately, you yell at the team, they're not selling, why aren't you selling? So I think I took over in June or July, I forget. But every month I would ask them to set the target for themselves. And every month they'd set a target and not meet it. Then I think in September, they set a target and I actually lowered it a little bit. Because I was trying to be somewhat realistic. And they actually met them. And then they started believing in themselves. So the first thing is you've got to get people in that division to believe in themselves. That's the Indian solution. In the US, what you do is fire them and get a new lottery. But that, at least in India in those days, that wasn't how it worked. Some parts of it are coming in today. Then we decided, not that these happened in sequence, but they were happening simultaneously, that look, I also need to get a whole new range of products, because what we had wasn't good to sell. So we then went out, we were out in the market, we found a whole new range of products, and we got them. And then decided to go against Xerox. Now, how do you tell your people, how do you tell the world you're better than them? So that's how we decided on comparative analysis. So we put up the Xerox machines and this does this, my machine does this, it's at a better price, better copy price, faster, whatever the stuff was. And we put those ads on. And that changed the whole thing. A year later, we were outselling them in the market. We actually got market share, blah, blah, blah. And actually the whole thing started when there was a board meeting where everyone said it's not a core business. Why are we doing copiers, losing money, let's get rid of it. Like a fool, I said at the board that we had a somewhat, well, there were largely founders on the board, we were somewhat a little more professional because we had joint venture with UP Electronics, so we had some outsiders in some of our board. I said, why do you want to sell an asset when it's got a low value? You should sell assets when they've got high value. So if you don't say, yeah, that's great, then why don't you want money? Which is how boards work, by the way. So that's how I ended up running reports. Then when we changed it, I went to the board and said, hey, now let's sell it. Now my asset is up. They said, you're crazy, we're making so much money, why do you want to sell this? Right, but again, it had to be sustained. I went off to the US. No one sustained that. 2 years later, I went through that cycle and came back to, hey, much lower profit. Again, what do we do? Blah, blah, blah. And then they got rid of that division. But that's basically how things work. But, even startups, when they get big, tend to be problems. Which is why Cisco now buys it has thousands of engineers doing development, Microsoft, but they don't seem to be, every time they're buying companies because they need new ideas. So the ideas always come from smaller companies. They're always much more agile, much closer to the market than say these companies. It should be the other way around. But the problem becomes when you have so many layers, by the time that guy who's in the trenches tells the person who's taking the decision, that channel is really bad and a lot of distortion happens. So what this guy does is not what this guy is giving. By the time he does it, this guy doesn't need it, he needs something else. That's a huge issue.
Question I have is, what will your next startup business be about? I mean, where is it that you see the next big opportunity?
IT industry, see, even today, if you focus on domain specific, you're differentiated. People are still being commoditized. By the way, the IT services industry is very the lower end, the more commoditized work you do, the higher your percentage profit. Unfortunately, the analysts only look at percentage. To them, that's important. So let's say if you do simple BPO, so guys who do local BPO in regional languages, they charge $2, the cost is 50 cents. But the margin there is huge. Because the infrastructure costs in a tier 3, tier 4 city is very low. So you probably make 50-60% margin. Right? After expenses, you'll probably still be above 30. Right? As you go more and more sophisticated, your margins get more and more squeezed. And in fact, as you get consultants where you charge $250 an hour more, your utilization is never more than 60%. And you're going to pay them a lot of money. You can't take a low-cost guy and charge $250 an hour. He won't last with you because he knows what you're charging. He'll expect to be paid accordingly. Right? Domain people are expensive. That's why lots of companies don't do that because they don't know how to sell. They don't know how to position them and stuff. So if you choose your domain, and you can choose any domain, whether it's supply chain, retail, capital markets, I mean, there are companies in telecom. It got somewhat commoditized, but if you focus on a domain and you can differentiate yourself in that domain, right, you get to be in the market. What do you think? See, there's no use trying to say I'm going to be one of the big three or big four, because that space is already taken. Right, and you're not going to be able to get there. Right, so you're not going to become a TCS or a Wipro or an HCL with that business. So forget the top 5, 6 places. That's not going to happen. So best is to go domain. Right? Now, if I had domain today, I'd be differentiated. But if I start thinking about it today, I'll probably have 3-4 years later. By that time, it will likely to become more commoditized than it is today. So you need some assets that you can leverage for consulting. It means I need some IP, assets, whatever you call it, that help me in my domain and make me more efficient. Okay. So ultimately, if I had to start a company today in the capital markets, I would look at something. Or in the services business, I would look at building IP, building domain, and then going on. So remember, there's a truism in life that high risk, high return, low risk, low return. If someone ever comes to you and says they're the low risk, high return project, it's an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. Don't even look at it. Right, so never look at low risk, high return, because those things don't work. High risk, low return will work. Low risk, high return never works. So anyone who uses those words together, just ignore it. I normally think the guy doesn't know what he's talking. But he doesn't know all the variables there, so I am not going to pay too much attention to this. So there's no such thing as a low risk high return. Just sorry, I didn't hear you.
So when you receive your first job, did that feel like a risk for you?
Yes, it did. I thought I mentioned that when I left the DCM job, I was worried about 2 or 3 things. One is obviously the total amount of income coming home would reduce, but there were 3 people running. I was the 4th, so it wasn't going to matter that much. Yes, it will impact your lifestyle, your quality of life to some extent. But I was going to be so busy that I didn't have the time for that quality of life return. So I figured that wasn't the big thing. Yes, the other one was, hey, this thing doesn't work out, you got mud on your face. Will I be able to get a job after 1 year? I was pretty confident. By that time I built enough of a reputation in the market that there were people who would have been willing to give me a job. I wouldn't have my choice of job, but I would have got it. Right. That was the logic. So the risk, you look at it and you try and justify whether it's worth it or not. You have to do that. You can't just blindly go into something. That's how I justify it.
Sir, as you are part of HCL, what is your policy to fight with the parent companies and deal with
I am not part of HCL anymore, and there I sort of disagree with what they do. One thing, there was a time when every Dell motherboard was designed by HCL. Right? When you don't see it, that's what we were doing at HCL America, which now become HCL Technologies. All Hyundai motherboards, all Dell motherboards, all designed by us. Right? So there's no, I think we lost the battle. When we took our R&D and started doing it for people abroad, we stopped doing it for ourselves in India and became a kit manufacturer. There's enough of a market in this country for country-specific hardware. So I should have kept some of my, so HCL has 2 companies, HCL Information Systems that Ajay ran for a long time, and HCL Technologies. So because we needed that expertise in technologies, HCL sold their R&D to HCL Technologies, which left HCL because of domestic manufacturing without an R&D. So they became a kit manufacturer. In my view, that was a mistake. Sell part of it, but you should have kept a part of it because that was your differentiator for many years. We used to do things in India that were India specific. When our first machine came out, we had something called a power shut-off auto restart, PSAR as we call it. So what we've done is we've taken a truck battery and connected it into the computer logic so that when the power failed, and by the way, it failed very regularly in those days, your computer stopped. But all the counters were held. So that when the power came back, it started from the point where it stopped. Okay. Every 2 weeks, the maintenance guy had to go and put distilled water in the battery. But that also allowed him to check on how the machine's being used and stuff like that. But that was unique. In fact, our relations with Pakistan are a lot better today than they were then. We had another, we had a war in 65 and we had a war in 71. Through my subsidiary in Singapore, I used to sell my computers to Pakistan as a Singaporean computer because they needed the power shut-off and still need power shut-off auto restart. We didn't have all these voltage stabilizers and all that. Very different world in that. In fact, I'll give you another story rather here. In 1980, when we, everyone was selling, in 1980 we were going to come up with, I think, Awad, who's chairman of NIT, he used to be a corporate planning man. So he came up with a white paper, business plan internally, to say how from selling 200 computers a year, you can sell 1,000 computers a year. Right? And in that, he listed out the issues. That where are we going to get 1,000 air conditioners? Where are we going to get 1,000 voltage stabilizers? And where are we going to get 1,000 programmers to run those computers? And part of the white paper, he said, don't look at the non-availability of programmers as a problem. Look at it as an opportunity. He said, why don't we train people instead of just giving them pieces of paper without training them, what is happening there, and have them become programmers, and that's how NIT got formed. NIT basically, we like the idea, we asked Pawar, are you willing to put your, put to action what you say, and he said yes. So we actually, NIT was owned 80% by the HCL founders. 20% was given to Pawar as options for his management. That's how NIT. In fact, we were also pioneers in stock options. And I'll tell you how that happened. We had no idea. In fact, I remember when I, 81, when I went to Seattle, I bumped into this guy called R.B. Rao, who was employee number 5 in HCL. He became employee number 37 in Microsoft. And उसने बहुत गाली दी. Hey, you never told me what options are. I kept taking less options and more salary. Right? I think options at Microsoft then were 37 cents. So he बहुत गाली दिया. He said, so much money I could have made that I lost because I opted for salary rather than options. But we were a joint sector company. 26% was owned by UP Electronics. We had bought back 16%. And 10% was still owned by them. And by that time, UP Electronics has started 13 other joint ventures, subsidiaries, whatever, all called Opteron something. You may have heard of Opteron. We were the only one that called Headstrong Limited because we were the first. That policy on Opteron something happened. Every one of them was making a loss. Ours was the only unit that was making a loss. So they refused to sell it. And we used to keep telling them, you are a development agency. You are supposed to develop more things, so I'm giving you the money, buy it from me. So you get more money to do more development. Ultimately what happened is they got a new chairman and managing director. And he wanted to show a profit, which he could only show if he bought our shares or sold our shares. Because then he'd be able to show a profit in that. So he agreed to sell. Now where are we going to get the money? We didn't have the money. So we went to State Bank of India, SBI Capital, run by a guy called SM Vasu, I think, some Vasu was there. Because he was Bengali, he played that line that, look, I want you to buy these shares. I will hold them for my employees. And every year I will give it to some of my employees who perform well. They will buy them from you at the price at which you bought. And every year they will increase by 18% because that's the interest you charge on the balance that's it. So the price will go up 18% every year. And that's how we got shares to a number of our employees over time. Because SBI agreed to fund it. So in a way, it's still not stock options, but in a way that was what you today know as some kind of stock. Hey, there are a lot of things you didn't know what they were because you were in this cloistered market in India. You didn't really have a view all over the world that we have.
Like if we nowadays look at the major startups which are running successfully, and if we search online, we see mostly IT sectors in which the startups are there or which are running successfully. Why not in an electrical field or in purely mechanical field there are such startups and which are either successful or visibly they are not even there. So what would be the reason according to you?
Yeah, part of the thing is, we don't have much of the infrastructure. We have a lot of knowledge. So you're seeing a lot of startups in the knowledge economy. Also, this business is changing really rapidly. Right? So whenever there's change, there's some disruption in the market. It's easy for startups to come in. So right now, you're seeing cloud, you're seeing analytics, right? You'll see a lot of startups in mobile, again for usage, stuff like that. It's unlikely you're going to see them in a chemical plant or in automotive. In automotive, you're seeing them by the way now, electric cars, stuff like that. So it will happen, but it tends to happen slower in some of the more traditional industries because they need machinery, you need some infrastructure. You're not seeing too much in hardware. Why? It's not hardware, we should be as good as anyone else. But the problem is, for me, if you ever go out and say, I want to make a cabinet, a plastic cabinet, it takes you 1.5 years to get the mold made. Right? Because the mold makers are backlogged. And then to get it out, just doesn't work that way in the US. In the US, when I want a printed circuit board, I get it the same day, fired and ready. Here, so what I do here, we used to do a design. We used to ship the rubber to the US, get the printed circuit board, get it here, test it, and move it up and down. It was still faster than waiting 6-8 weeks to get a sample here, or wiring it manually, which is what we used to do. So, there are issues. We have to find a way to solve it. And in fact, the government, I think, has just cleared some 15,000 crores for 2 chip plants. Because if we don't get a component industry active in India, by 2020, import of components will exceed the bill for import of oil. Today it's number 3, only to oil and gold. Right, but it will exceed both of them by 2020. We don't get active. 2020 is not too far. So there's only so much software you can do. Right? There's a whole lot of stuff happening outside that. If someone's got to address, I don't think the government has to do it. Can't hear you. Presume you're speaking as well as yeah, now.
So it's an exact question to others we are wanting to ask, like you said, the market is getting very competitive and less chances to make mistakes. Sir, will it be helpful for an engineer to do an MBA and learn something from it before becoming an engineer? An MBA degree be helpful for so if you could repeat the question.
Yeah. The question is, would an MBA degree be useful for an engineer before he becomes an entrepreneur? So, 2 things. Let me answer by asking a question. So, what do you learn in engineering? I'll tell you what I think we learn. I mean, again, how if a problem has lots of variables, how to look at a few key variables and then look at a solution that will give you a suboptimal answer to that problem. So you don't let multiple variables get you stymied. Try and reduce so it sort of makes you simplify your life. What do you think you'll get from an MBA? An MBA just gives you tools to be able to analyze the market in a sense. So if you are going to be a business analyst, a financial analyst, an MBA is a lot of help because it gets you and tells you what the tools. But if you are going to be an entrepreneur, I think rather than MBA, I spent 2 years out getting experience, making some contacts that will actually get you that. That's my view. Right? There will be lots of people who think differently and they could be right. But that's how I do. Which is one reason I always used to think civil engineering is great. Because in our time we used to use slide rule. So you spend 1 hour on your slide rule trying to get the width of some column. And then you say factor of safety 30, you multiply that by 2. To me it was crazy. I could have said that before I started. That if I'm going to keep that. But I'm not a civil engineer, so I have no idea. I used to always find it crazy. Because we had to do course in civil engineering as part of our, could be an engineer until you did geotechnical, physical metallurgy, and some stuff that we had. Whereas we guys, knuckle joint and cutter joint, mechanical engineering. But some things are really useful as a concept. I don't know, you guys do thermodynamics? Yes. You do enthalpy, entropy? Yes. I find that the concept of system boundary becomes very important. It's like, I still remember, why doesn't the refrigerator air conditioner room? It will if you make the system boundary where the door opens and the backside is outside the boundary. Then it will refrigerate you. It will cool your room like a refrigerator, like a air conditioner. But if the system boundary has the entire refrigerator in it, then efficiency means more heat is generated than the cooling. So it will actually warm the room. So that whole system boundary concept, I find it very useful. And I find it very useful when I explain to people about various things by saying if the boundary was here, it will do this, and the boundary is there, it will do something else. But that came to me from my thermodynamics. At least I remember it from my thermodynamics. Not that my father, some stuff you have to say, the zeros lower, you can't forget those things. Or the first one, A, B, C, and they all in combination. Remember that.